Just as a brief introduction to the Sikha, just as a reminder, we had the three children of Levi, Kahas, Gershon, and Merari, and each one of their families, as they carried the different parts of the Mishkan, had different jobs. The Bnei Kahas were carrying the holiest vessels, like the Orain, the Menorah, the Mizbechos, etc. We had the Bnei Gershon, which were carrying the various different tapestries and curtains and screens, etc. And we had the Bnei Merari that were carrying the actual boards and the pillars, the beams, etc. The Rebbe says, on the pasuk that's discussing how the Levium were counted between the ages 30 and 50, the pasuk says, Kol haba, all the Levium that came, la avoida, avoidas avoida, that came to do a service of work, va avoidas maso, and a service of carrying. Rashi explains, what does avoidas avoida mean? A service for another work. This is the singing or the playing music with cymbals and harps, which is not an avoida itself, but it's for the benefit of another avoida, the avoida of karbonos. So the Rebbe asks, in the Gemara says that this refers, similarly, avoidas avoida refers to singing, but it doesn't mention any instruments. So why is Rashi mentioning instruments? If Rashi does mention instruments, why does Rashi mention two instruments? There were plenty of other instruments. In fact, if we speak about categories of instruments, in Divrei Hayamim we see there are three general categories. There was the cymbals, there were the harps, and there was another category called nevolim, which, as the Rebbe discusses later in the Sikha, is a certain wind instrument that we blow in. Also, why doesn't Rashi mention singing by mouth? Then Rashi goes on in the next words of the pasuk and says, Va'avoidas masa, and the service of carrying. Rashi says, Kimashmoy, as it simply sounds, it's the avoid of carrying the load. So, simply what Rashi seems to be saying is that we shouldn't think that just like by avoidas avoida we translated a service for another service, we shouldn't think that over here it means a service for carrying, but not carrying itself. So the Rebbe says, well, what else may have we thought that we would have been referring to? In order to explain all of this, the Rebbe says, in the beginning of the parsha, we now turn to another pasuk that says, Naso yesroish b'nei Gershon gamheim. You should count the children of Gershon, also them. Rashi says, just like I commanded you in regards to the Bnei Kahas, to see how many came to the category of work. The question is, what exactly is Rashi trying to tell us with this whole arichos? To tell us how many came to the category of work. You should not say Esroish Bnei Gershon, you're counting the children of Gershon, them as well. So the Maharal explains that the Gam Haim is trying to tell us not that we're counting them as well, from between 30 and 50. It's trying to tell us that the Nosei Esroish, the special chashivus of elevating them, etc., applies to them as well. But if that's the case, why would we say Gam Haim as if they're secondary to Bnei Kahas? And also, why don't we say the same thing by Bnei Merari? Here it doesn't say Nosei Esroish. Now you may try to say, because there's a difference in what they were carrying, as explained before, Bnei Kahas are carrying the holiest things. So maybe they have the main chashivos, the main Nosei Esroish. Gershon is carrying the curtains, that's a step down, and Merari is only carrying the boards. The problem with this is that Rashi himself explained that Nosei Esroish, Rashi said, is specifically connected. You should see who is the ones that have the strength, the power, the ability to carry. And this is specifically between the ages of 30 and 50 that they have a lot of koyach. Before 30, they're not strong enough. After 50, they're already getting weaker. And that's what Nosei Esroish means. So if that's the case, well, then Gershon is also doing work and carrying, and Merari is also. So why would there be a difference between Kahas and Gershon, that they're only secondary, and Merari doesn't even get the Nosei Esroish? And therefore, says the Rebbe, we have to say that there's two things going on over here. There's one thing that all the Levium are similar in. They're all being counted between 30 and 50 because a certain amount of strength is needed. And then there is Nosei Esroish, a special kind of koyach that is needed, which is primarily going to be belonging to Kahas, Gershon a little bit less, and Merari not at all. So the Rebbe explains, the Bnei Kahas, their whole avodah was carrying on their shoulders. They didn't have any wagons, as we'll see in the continuation. All they did was carrying all of these things on their shoulders, and therefore they needed a lot of koyach. And that's why the expression that the Torah uses by them is avoidas maso. Their whole avodah is about carrying. By Bnei Gershon, the expression is la avoid ulama. So that means there's other work besides the carrying. By Merari, it actually says mishmeres masom. They're only appointed over the carrying of the loads, but not that they are working and carrying it themselves. They only had to be made sure that it's being carried because it could be going on the wagons as well, and it was put on the wagons. Now, they're still counted between 30 and 50, these Bnei Merari, because you still need some sort of strength carrying it onto the wagons, etc., setting it up, but nevertheless, the main koyach is not emphasized over there because it was mainly done by the wagons. Now let's go back to the pasuk that we were discussing originally, where it said avodas masa, and Rashi said that when we're speaking about all the Leviim, they sing songs, and avodas masa should be taken literally, they carry loads. What else would have we thought? We asked. We would have thought maybe avodas masa means the people that are in charge to make sure things are being carried. Says this is what Rashi is coming to negate. No, we can't say that. Since we're trying to describe why the Leviim are being counted between 30 and 50, we have to say that something that actually is going to take extra work, physical work. And that's why avodas masa has to be taken literally, those that are actually doing work. Now, the question is going to be, so what's going to be the difference between Gershon and Merari? Merari, we just said, is putting their things on the wagons, but they're also doing some of the work schlepping it to the wagons. Well, Gershon had a similar sort of situation. They also had wagons. The curtains that they're going to be carrying is also going to be put on the wagons. So the Rebbe says we're going to focus over here and see that there was more strength needed and more carrying going on by the Bnei Gershon. The Rebbe makes 2 points. Number one, the Rebbe says, the order, the way things were done, seemingly would have been that first the courtyard would have been set up. First the Mishkan would have been set up, and then you have the courtyard being set up around it. And when the Yeriyos are being taken off, let's focus on that first. When the Yeriyos are being taken off, the courtyard is still standing. So the Leviim are taking the curtains off the Mishkan. They have to carry them throughout the whole courtyard. The beams are still standing. And now they have to bring them to the wagons. So this was a whole long way where they have to be carrying, the Bnei Gershon are carrying these Yeriyos a very, very long way. Whereas, because the wagons couldn't have come closer, the Rebbe explains, based on the measurements, the wagons wouldn't have fit through between the poles of the courtyard. Then come the Bnei Merari, easily pulling over the wagons to the poles and then to the beams of the Mishkan, and able to load them right onto the wagons. They don't have to schlep so far. Although the Rebbe says there's other ways of looking at it, how it was done, could be the courtyard was taken off first, but there's an additional point. The Bnei Gershon having to put on the Yeriyos onto the crusher, meaning they need to climb up, carrying these curtains, putting them over the top, and then tying them up, looping them in, etc., etc. So there was much more physical work needed by the Bnei Gershon, and that's why we emphasize specifically by them that there was koyach needed, and that they were the ones that Naso Yesroish, etc., etc., as opposed to Merari, which once again didn't need that much koyach. They're able to bring the wagons right over. You could have a few people together carrying a board, putting it onto the wagon, and you don't need that much koyach. If this is the way we look at this, at what the pasuk is telling us, that the psukim are trying to describe to us, so why do you need between 30 and 50 for the koyach that's needed, just like Naso Yesroish is for the ones that are koyach are needed? Now we can understand what the pasuk is telling us. And that there's two basic reasons for the koyach. One is going to be to do with the song, which we'll explain in a minute. And the other one, avodas masa, in the literal sense, those that need to carry are between 30 and 50. Why do you need koyach for the song? This is what Rashi, now let's go back to that. Rashi tells us, the cymbals and the harps. These are the things where you need more physical effort. Navel is a wind instrument, as we said before. You're blowing. Singing by mouth, definitely you don't need a lot of koyach. Which is the one that you need a lot of koyach for? This is specifically those instruments, the hand instruments, which you're going to need a lot of koyach. And that's why it's specifically that the pasuk is telling it to us over here, right at the end of the counting between 30 and 50, to explain to us why are we counting between 30 and 50? Because for this, these two avodas you're going to need koyach for, these musical instruments as well as the carrying. The Rebbe says we have something very interesting coming out of here. According to Rashi in Pshuta Shel Mikra Al Derech HaHalacha, Rashi tells us later that after the age 50 they will be able to go back to sing. But according to what we just explained, that would only mean singing with the mouth or with that wind instrument, the navel, but not with the harps and the cymbals for which you need more koyach. Another point would be, based on this logic, there shouldn't be a difference between Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, and this age of 50 in regards to the cymbals and the harp should apply even in the Beis HaMikdash. Finally, the Rebbe finishes off with a beautiful thing, Al Pi Chassidus. And the Rebbe explains the following. The Alter Rebbe says that Naso Yesroish, lifting up the head, represents the idea of taking the seichel and going to that which is higher than seichel, the level of rotzoin, will, going to keser, the concept of going bli gvul. The Alter Rebbe explains that this is specifically connected to Bnei Gershon and Bnei Kahos. They are on the level of mahalchim, they are on the level of going, on journeying. One is mulmayla lamata, one is mulmata lamayla, and it goes Naso Yesroish. Specifically in regards to them, they are the ones going in the way of bli gvul. Whereas Merari are called stationary oimdim, like the kroshim that they carried, which are called atzei shittim oimdim. Now, L'cha'ayra, the Rebbe says, asking on the Alter Rebbe, the Yidden are all journeying through the Midbar. They're all heading to this idea of hiluch, journeying in a way of bli gvul. So surely Merari has this as well. But based on the explanation that we said, that there is a difference in the Naso Yesroish, whether you're carrying on your shoulders by yourself or carrying on the wagons, we can now understand it. The Rebbe says, generally, in the spiritual journey of bli gvul, there's three levels. One is the Nefesh HaBahamis, that's gaining a tremendous level of Avos Hashem through our work of refining it. It's being elevated and going higher and higher, since it has such a tremendously high source in Olam HaToyu. It has a power to go in a way of bli gvul with its Avos Hashem. In addition to that, Chassidus explains, once the Nefesh HaBahamis is getting excited with this great passion, it schleps the Nefesh HaLikis along with it as well to also go bli gvul. Finally, eventually, the Nefesh HaLikis soars and goes up higher in a way of bli gvul. As the Pasuk says, Haviyani HaMelech HaDorav, there's a certain element that the Nefesh HaLikis goes to its original source that's beyond everything. Says the Rebbe, this will be the difference between Gershon, Kahos, and Merari. Merari, their elevation, or what's happening by them, their journey is mainly happening through the wagons, as we said. That's more like the Nefesh HaBahamis going in a way of bli gvul, but it's not the person himself yet. It's his behemoth. By Gershon is emphasized the idea of acharecha norutza, so therefore there's avoida and there's masa. There's the carrying by himself, and there's that which is through the wagon that represents the Nefesh HaBahamis and the Nefesh HaLikis going together. Finally, you have Kahos, which represents the Nefesh HaLikis, the idea of going Haviyani HaMelech HaDorov, the idea of the Nefesh HaLikis going up to the highest source, being reunited to Hashem. This is not shaykh at all to the wagons to the Nefesh HaBahamis. What are the Kahos carrying? Mainly the Orain, the Torah, which is the idea of Haviyani HaMelech HaDorov. When is Haviyani HaMelech HaDorov? The Yid unites with the Eibishter. This was when the Eibishter gave us the Torah on Chag HaShavuos.